In 1845, Sir John Franklin led 129 men into the Canadian Arctic aboard Britain's most advanced polar expedition ever assembled, searching for the fabled Northwest Passage. Every single one of them died. And more than a century and a half later, forensic science proved something the British Empire spent generations refusing to believe. Before the last of them died, starving survivors cut apart and ate the bodies of their own dead crewmates, including, DNA has now confirmed, one of the expedition's own ship captains. This isn't speculation. It's confirmed by cut-marked bones, DNA analysis, and 2 shipwrecks found exactly where the people the Empire ignored said they'd be. This is the true story of the Franklin expedition. On May 19, 1845, 2 Royal Navy ships, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, sailed from England carrying 129 officers and men under the command of Sir John Franklin, a 59-year-old veteran of 3 earlier Arctic voyages. Their mission: chart the final unmapped stretch of the Northwest Passage, the sea route connecting the Atlantic to the Pacific through the frozen maze of the Canadian Arctic. No expedition had ever been better prepared for it. Both ships were reinforced with iron for smashing through pack ice, fitted with steam engines for auxiliary power, and stocked with over 3 years of preserved food, a 1,000-book library, and fine officers' china. British newspapers called it the expedition least likely in history to fail. In late July 1845, European whaling ships spotted Erebus and Terror in Baffin Bay, waiting for conditions to improve before pushing further into the ice. It was the last confirmed sighting of any member of the expedition by anyone from the outside world. For the next 2 years, nothing. No message. No survivor. No wreckage. Just silence from the most well-equipped Arctic mission Britain had ever sent north. The ships had become trapped in thick pack ice near King William Island in September 1846, and stayed trapped through 2 consecutive brutal Arctic winters. Sir John Franklin died aboard ship on June 11, 1847, before conditions turned truly desperate, according to a note his officers later left behind. By April 1848, 24 men were dead, Franklin among them. The 105 who remained made a final, catastrophic decision: abandon the ice-locked ships entirely and march south on foot, hauling heavy lifeboats loaded with supplies, and bizarrely silverware, books, and other items of no survival value, across hundreds of miles of Arctic ice and tundra, hoping to reach a distant Hudson's Bay Company outpost. Scurvy, starvation, and exposure were already tearing through the crew. Some modern researchers believe lead leaching from poorly soldered food tins may have compounded the damage, worsening both their physical health and their judgment. Not one of the 105 men who set out on that march is known to have survived. Years later, Scottish explorer John Rae, surveying Arctic territory for the Hudson's Bay Company, encountered local Inuit hunters who told him what they had witnessed. A group of roughly 40 starving white men dragging a boat south years earlier, and later the remains of a larger camp of corpses, showing unmistakable signs that the last survivors had resorted to cutting apart and eating their own dead in a desperate final bid to stay alive. Rae reported the testimony faithfully to the British Admiralty in 1854, exactly as the Inuit witnesses had described it to him. Victorian Britain refused to accept it. The idea that Royal Navy officers, civilized, disciplined Englishmen, could have resorted to cannibalism was treated as an outrageous slander. Charles Dickens himself wrote a widely read public rebuttal, insisting the high-spirited English gentlemen of the expedition would never have done such a thing, and effectively accusing the Inuit witnesses of fabricating the entire account. Rae, for delivering an unwelcome truth, was largely denied the credit and honors given to other Arctic explorers of his era. The Inuit had been telling the truth the entire time. It took more than 130 years for physical proof to catch up to what Inuit oral testimony had said all along. Starting in the 1980s and 1990s, forensic teams examining skeletal remains recovered from King William Island found something impossible to explain away. Cut marks on the bones, consistent with knife work used to strip flesh from a body. Cannibalism among the expedition's last survivors wasn't Inuit slander. It was documented fact. Then, in 2014, a search team from Parks Canada, working directly from Inuit oral history, passed down across generations, describing almost exactly where a ship had gone down, located the wreck of HMS Erebus, remarkably intact on the Arctic seafloor. In 2016, HMS Terror was found nearby, even better preserved, sitting almost exactly where that same oral tradition said it would be. The most striking confirmation came recently, through DNA analysis of recovered bones bearing cut marks. Scientists identified one set of remains as belonging to Captain James Fitzjames, commanding officer of HMS Erebus under Franklin. A Royal Navy captain, one of the expedition's own commanding officers, had been eaten by members of his own dying crew. Britain sent its best ships, its most experienced commander, and its most advanced technology into the Arctic, and lost every single one of the 129 men who went. The people who actually knew what happened to them were dismissed for over a century, because the truth didn't fit what the British Empire wanted to believe about its own officers. Franklin's expedition vanished. His own men ate him. It took cut-marked bones, 2 sunken ships, and modern DNA to finally prove that the witnesses everyone chose to ignore had been right from the very beginning. Subscribe if you want more. See you in the next one.